Well, I wrote the book because I realized that when I looked into my past, every time I was successful, certain things were in play. And every time I failed, and I have failed, there were certain things that were not in play. And so I started doing some research. And I interviewed over 50 accountability masters on 6 continents, everyone from CEOs, chairman of the board of major corporations, Hall of Fame athletes, heads of state, explorers, someone who climbed Mount Everest, and the individual that led the team in South Africa that rewrote their constitution, which that's really the birth of a nation. And what I discovered is that there were 5 proactive accountabilities. Here's what I realized. I realized that people want to be accountable. They just don't always know what they're accountable for. And so we created a simple formula, if you will, to follow to understand that there's 5 areas that we need to apply proactive accountability. And if we do that, then what happens is accountability is not a consequence. Accountability becomes our competitive advantage. And that was the purpose of the book, because accountability is at the very seed of success. It's what makes sure you achieve what it is that you're trying to achieve. But we need to know how to be better at being proactively accountable. Well, the Accountability Academy was born out of this entire experience, because what we realized traveling around and speaking to groups and organizations and Fortune 500 companies and international conglomerates and all these great organizations that I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with, that whether I would work with them for an hour or a day or even 2 days, what would happen is people would go back to work, and the pressure of getting done what they needed to get done was so overwhelming that many times they were not able to put into use the skills and the techniques that I had taught. So what we wanted to do was create a new formula, a new way of absorbing information, but more importantly, going towards adoption, getting to the point where people use those techniques. So the Accountability Academy is a year-long experience. It can be engaged by individuals, but we also have organizations that use it to drive accountability through their entire organization. And we reveal pieces of information throughout the year, and we have people focus on one concept at a time, let them absorb that concept, and let them apply that concept before moving on to the next one. So by delivering it in small, manageable pieces, what we find is that people are better equipped to use the material, and that over time we gain significant change. You see, if we try to change something in a short period of time, it doesn't stick. But if we start a conversation around accountability, either with an individual or with an organization, and that conversation continues for a year, by the end of the year, we've changed the way that people think and their habits and the way they act. Well, accountable organizations, or organizations that have several things in place. One, the organization is made up of individuals who are personally accountable. I mean, it starts with personal accountability. It's difficult if I'm not an accountable individual to come into an organization, into an organizational culture that stresses accountability and be accountable in that environment. So I need to be accountable first, or I need to be taught how to be accountable. That's where the Accountability Academy comes in. The second aspect is that the organization needs to reward accountable behavior. So there needs to be a culture within the organization that is based in accountability, which means that there needs to be a conversation around accountability that is ongoing, that is constant. And this is what we try to encourage, so that we train people to be personally accountable, how to understand what their proactive accountabilities are, and then we look, how do we keep this conversation, this dialogue going within the organization, so we create organizations that are accountable to not only identify what their strategic intents are, but to go about doing the right things to achieve those strategic intents. We create peer pressure. If everyone is showing personal accountability and the organization rewards accountability, then what happens is new people coming in the organization, they figure out pretty quickly they either need to get on the wagon or off the wagon. And off the wagon is out of the organization. And that's okay. If you're involved in leadership in an organization, you want to weed out those people that aren't going to be good contributors to what it is that you're trying to achieve. So what happens is we want to create that environment where, if you will, there is peer pressure, so that we can develop that organizational accountability and let that be a strength that actually helps us drive our organizations forward. Well, I believe at the end of the day, when you take away all of our possessions, our money, our clothes, our home, our families, our friends, when you strip it all away, the only thing that's left are the choices that we've made. We become what we become based on the accumulation of those choices over time. And so I think it was several things from being in multiple businesses from the time I was a child, picking up Coke bottles and selling them back for the deposit on the Coke bottles, to collecting golf balls, to selling those used golf balls to golfers, to in college being involved in selling stereo equipment. And I'm just an entrepreneur at heart. And over the years, I've had a lot of people that have thanked me for the advice that I've shared with them. And many times I didn't even remember sharing that advice. And so I thought, wow, if I can have a positive impact without trying, what would happen if I did try? And so I wrote my first book, and that's been 18 years now, and started speaking, and one thing has led to another, so that I still own some other individual organizations. I still have another company that I own and I operate, but my focus is on creating and sharing ideas in a manner that people and organizations can put them to use to make a difference. And I focus on what comes out of accountability, because I believe accountability drives all personal and organizational performance. My mentor, Bill Goh, the first president of the National Speakers Association, once said, "I'm not accountable for the audience, I'm accountable to the audience." I can bring my message to the audience, but I don't know how the audience is going to show up. I don't know if they're coming from a party or they're on their way to a party. I don't know what conditions they've been exposed to prior to the event. So it's always difficult to understand exactly what's going to happen in that moment. I like to believe that I share a message that has impact, that can inspire people to open their minds and realize that there are things that we can all be doing that can significantly change the way that we are able to understand our strategic intent, achieve it as individuals, and then also as organizations. I think, though, that it only starts with that message, that it takes a continuation, a development of this thought process. So, do I change the world in a 45-minute keynote? Absolutely not. Can I inspire someone to go a little bit deeper? I sure do hope so. Maybe they pick up the book, No More Excuses, and they read it and they understand the concepts better. Maybe they join the Accountability Academy. Maybe the CEO from an organization says, wow, this is important stuff. And it's not enough just to hire you to come in and speak at our annual meeting. We want this to permeate our culture. What do we need to do? And so hopefully those secondary conversations come up so that I can be a part of driving that process forward. Well, it was a tremendous honor to be elected as the president of the National Speakers Association, and to serve all those professional speakers in the U.S., as well as be engaged in our sister organizations around the world. Being involved as president of the National Speakers Association only heightened my awareness of what a wonderful career this is, but it also introduced me to people in South Africa and Australia and England, Germany, Australia, Singapore, Malaysia. I was in Cape Town, South Africa, speaking at an international speakers summit. And through this entire process, I built so many connections that personally, I was personally rewarded, and professionally, I know that I grew through that experience. I believe one of our 5 proactive accountabilities is that we need to be accountable to contribute to our relationships. Being involved at this level of leadership, being involved on a global basis, helped me contribute to far more relationships than I could have otherwise. And by expanding my relationships and expanding my sphere of contribution, I feel I made a big impact, but inevitably that impact comes back in people that are looking to assist me, to help me, to be there when I need a connection to help me grow my business. So it was a wonderful experience. Well, I'd love a phone call. If they want to make an improvement, they can engage me at samsilverstein.com, accountabilityacademy.com, or they can call us here in the office, which is 888-MOTIVATE. Doesn't get any simpler than that, but would love to be part of that process. Whether you pick up my book, No More Excuses, read it, and take what you learn and put it to use, whether you engage me to come into the organization to look at what issues you're facing and to come up with a plan or a roadmap to move forward. I think the main idea is that we need to come to the realization that we need to stop making excuses, that we need to not look at accountability as a consequence. It's not just about standing up and saying, oh, it's my fault, it won't happen again, but understand what we are truly accountable for. And when we put that into play, then we make accountability our competitive advantage.